I love it. I love it. Oh, you do great work, Dave. That's awesome. I
That's
love
freaking
it. It's
awesome, Dave.
Somber this time. It was like it started out with like I was getting into it, dancing, and then all of a
dancing
sudden,
zombies, and
now we're in black and
switch
white.
it up.
We're chilling. Oh, wow. All right. So we got Bob, JD, John, Kathy, Melissa. What's up, guys? Glad you can make it. Hey, Donna's here too. Nice. Tonight we are going to talk about monsters. I love monsters. I love monsters. And basically we each took one because I wasn't sure how long each one would take. So we could probably just get into discussion of, if we run out of time, we can always take viewer requests. But so monsters, I mean, just in general, before we actually dive right into it, I mean, monsters are like synonymous with Halloween. It's like as soon as October hits, like you see it on the television stations, it's like it's monster time and all kinds of monster movies, zombies and vampires and werewolves and all kinds of stuff. And it's just witches and ghosts. I love it. I love it. I love watching all this shit. And it's fun. It's fun to watch. And it was like one of these ideas, and it wasn't an original idea from me. I think one of you guys actually brought it up about monsters, and I just jumped on it. So I totally stole it from one of you, where I was like, let's get into this. And I actually I love when a topic that you think is going to be like, this is going to be a little bit, it'll be cool, but maybe not a big deal. And then you start diving into it, and it's like, wow, holy shit. Like, I know from my perspective, when I get into mine, and I pick zombies. So when I get into this, it's like the history really sucked where it comes from, and in relation to the modern day zombies that we have. So, but that's pretty much my short and sweet opening statements about monsters. I'm going to pass it off to Tim.
I got the point right.
Yay!
All right.
I chose the Grim Reaper. I started going down the list, looking at some. I thought about something a little different, like AI, clowns, thinking about the psychological aspect of them, especially with AI and clowns, where it's like when you look at aliens, when you think about the fear of aliens, and AI is more about people's worry about what's going to happen to them. Like, it's like a projection of what you think the future will be like. So you can ask one person, what do you think will happen if aliens come down? And they'll say they're going to destroy the planet and enslave everybody and kill the rest. I don't know. And then you can ask another person, and they're like, oh, they're going to come down and they're going to show us a better way and increase our medicine and show us better living skills. But if you really think about it, those are two different perspectives that are extremely different. And it makes me wonder why one person would think that something coming from another place is going to kill us, and another person would think that something coming from another place would absolutely help us. But I ended up seeing the Grim Reaper, and for some reason, when I saw the Grim Reaper, my first thought was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm going with the Grim Reaper.
Nice.
And I have to say, going with the Grim Reaper, I was really surprised. I was really pleasantly surprised with the history of it. It was really interesting, at least for me. So I'll be glad to get into that.
Very cool. Dave.
Cool. Well, I picked vampires, and I didn't realize how much history there was to them. It's a hell of a lot of reading. So, it was pretty interesting. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know, a couple things familiar with, and a couple surprises along the way. So that was another fun couple hours digging into that and trying to pull a few notes together, and we'll kind of see where it goes. But yeah, Halloween and monsters, as a little kid, I still remember the vampire poster with the glow in the dark eyes and the fang. So you'd charge it up real good before you went to bed, and it would glow for, back in those days, a whopping 10 minutes before it faded out, because that fluorescent technology just wasn't so great. And then, Frankenstein, that was always one that definitely remember, and one of my all-time favorite comedies is Young Frankenstein. So even the horror aspect
Yeah.
brought into the comedy world was just fantastic. And big fan of monsters. Love zombies. Kenny jumped on that one right away, so didn't have that one. That's all right. Went to my next favorite, vampires, and then after that, you got the other traditional ones like the werewolf and the Invisible Man, Tim Vickers.
That's great. When that popped up on screen, I was in my car watching the video that you sent us, and it just came up. And as soon as his came up, I spit all over the steering wheel because I was like, "Oh my god, that's hilarious!"
I'm not even trying to show his face anymore. We just go right to the missing Tim, the invisible Tim.
That's great.
So anyway, but yeah, it was fun to look into this stuff, and look forward to seeing what you guys found and talking about it.
All right. So I guess I'll just jump right in. So looking into history of zombies, the modern day zombie, I base it off of, and I'm old enough to remember Night of the Living Dead. So that was my first real exposure to zombies. Like that was the first time seeing that far off figure kind of like waddling back and forth in the background of the cemetery, and then all of a sudden it was a zombie and it was trying to eat somebody. I was like, holy fuck. Like, what is this? But that's not how it started out, and it really started out in a more horrible way. So, and I'm going to totally cheat off my notes because there's so much to try to remember. But basically, the zombie, from what I found, the zombie mythos starts in about the 17th century. So we're talking about 1625, and it was in Haiti, and at the time, so let's see, it was known as Saint Dominique, and ruled by France at the time, and they brought in slaves from Africa to come and work the fields, the sugar fields. So they brought in a whole bunch of slaves, and it was really brutal. And I mean, I can't even describe because I have no idea. But from everything I read, it was a very brutal thing where most of the slaves that would come over would be worked to death within 2 to 3 years. So they were basically just working nonstop, treated horribly, barely fed, just enough to survive, and they would literally drop dead in the fields. So you can only imagine, like, if you're in that kind of situation, what's your only way out? You know, you can try to escape, or the most common escape, unfortunately, was suicide. And the African slaves that came over, they had this belief that if they died normally, they would be released to what was called the Languené, and I'm trying to pronounce it. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. So I tried to practice. Languené, which literally means Guinea or Africa in general. They would be released back into, I guess, a spirit version of Africa where they would be able to be free for the rest of eternity. However, if they chose suicide, then it was like damnation. They were doomed to be trapped within their own body and doomed to lurk around. They would just walk around the plantations as zombies. Basically, they called them soulless zombies. And they would just roam around for all eternity. Not actually the person. Their personality would be gone. It would just be almost like a blank shell, just going on instinct, walking around. So this belief, let's see, I'm going after, okay, so in 1804, so we're talking from 1625 to 1804. This is when this was going on. So that's a pretty long time that this horrible kind of treatment of people was going on, and this strong belief that they had. So after the Haitian Revolution in 1804 and the end of the French colonialism, that's not a word I'm used to saying like ever. After that, then this idea, this belief of zombies kind of started going into the folklore, the Haitian folklore. It started subsiding into it. The myth evolved slightly when it was incorporated into voodoo, which Dave has represented behind him there, which is awesome. But it was incorporated into the voodoo religion, with Haitians believing that zombies were corpses reanimated by shamans and voodoo priests. There were also sorcerers known as Bokor, Bokor, and they used black magic to reanimate these corpses that they would steal out of graves. And they were forced to, well, not really forced because they were just mindless zombies. They would just do their free labor. They would work for these sorcerers and just either do work in the fields or around the house, or they were set on, quote, nefarious deeds, like attacking neighbors or competitors, stuff like that. So really, I mean, that's still shitty when you think about it. Like, it's
very shitty.
And that's part of the myth. So I don't know if that actually happened, but that's part of the mythology that I was reading. So let's see. Zombies of Haitian voodoo religion were a more fractured representation of the anxieties of slavery. So this belief persisted, and it was bringing up this memory of when slavery was in effect, and it kind of kept the Haitians, like, I guess, on edge, and believing in that this was necromancy. It was the working of evil sorcerers and this kind of stuff. So it wasn't until around 1929 there was a book that was released, and it was called The Magic Island by William Seabrook, and it's considered the first popular, so maybe not the actual first, but the first popular English language text to confront and deal with the idea of zombies through Haitian mythology. So it brought all the myths and the beliefs from Haiti, from the African slaves, and brought it into the rest of the world by telling everybody, what was going on, how their beliefs worked. Let me see here. And then it was, this was actually interesting. I just finished this. In 1932, this was the first time that we have the Haitian myth of zombie crossing over with American pop culture. There was a movie called White Zombie, which I mean, it's definitely like the white part is because white people got involved. And just like everything, we just popularize it and we fuck it up.
We fuck it up. I was going to say we take it and we fuck it up.
Basically,
JD kind of called that out just a minute ago. White Zombie.
Oh yeah, that was it. I just watched it. I watched it before the show and got done about a half hour ago. It starred Bela Lugosi, which JD I know loves. And it's honestly, there's a lot of staring. Because this is a 1932 film, and I gotta say, I love Bela Lugosi, but he has some thick ass eyebrows, because there's a lot of camera shots that come in like that, and that's all you see. And I kept thinking, like, damn, you got a lot of hair on those eyebrows. Damn. But that really incorporated the idea of the Haitian zombie, because they were, when you saw the zombies, they were not the rotting corpses that was trying to eat flesh or brains. They were simply mindless servants. They did their master's bidding, and without a thought, without a word, they just did their bidding. And there's even a scene where there's a whole bunch of workers in a factory, and one of them is carrying this like big, I guess it's either sugar or grain or whatever. They're carrying it, and he starts to wobble and stumble, and he falls into a like this big well grinder, and there's like people underneath. There's like eight or 10 guys turning this thing. This idea, this belief. And you, what's that? I hear that. Damn it, Tim.
No, I have headphones.
Wasn't me.
I'm testing out headphones this time for that.
Okay,
Weird.
so they basically this zombie falls into this grinder, and there's no reaction from anybody. They just keep grinding away. The poor body gets grinded up into everything. What else? So this was a notable introduction of white people as interlopers in the zombie legend, and that's really where it started crossing over into pop culture in America, because it wasn't until 1968 that the legendary George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead, and that's when we first got our look at flesh-eating zombies, which really gave birth to the modern day zombie, because that's when you had you started having other films. You had Return of the Living Dead, and you had The Walking Dead. You had Shaun of the Dead, which is one of my favorites.
Shaun of the Dead?
Shaun of the Dead, yes.
Absolutely one of my favorite of all time. Absolutely.
And I mean, 28 Days Later, you have all these zombie movies that build on the legend. And then it just builds on this, where you have either slow moving zombies that still eat people. You had I think it was the spoof film. Was it Return of the Living Dead, or I forget the exact name, but it was more of a spoof where that's when you got that first brains. You got that first spoken line where they're like, brains. Oh,
was that the one?
Now I'm gonna look it up.
Was that the one where there were like a bunch of kids and
like toxic waste?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when they went down and opened the container and
yes. Yeah. That was more of a spoof to me. I didn't take that as a quote unquote serious zombie movie, but it was
still good though. I still enjoyed it. As bad as it was.
Good. It was really, really good. We do find there's a couple other tidbits before I read you a really good quote that sums up about zombies and their history. But there's not zombies per se, but zombie-like characters in the Bible. And this was interesting because I found, the book of Ezekiel describes a vision where Ezekiel is dropped in a boneyard and prophesies to the bones. The bones start to shake and become covered with muscle and flesh until they are reanimated. Yet there was no breath in them. So they were reanimated corpses that didn't breathe. Yet he was speaking to them. The book of Isaiah states that thy dead men shall live, together with my dead body shall they rise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust, for thy dew is the dew of the herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. So he was talking about people rising from the dead as well. So that's interesting. I mean, it's not really zombies, but it's a form of zombie.
Sure. It's a zombie. It's definitely a zombie.
There are a couple reports in medical journals that I saw, and then these are only brief notes, so I don't have the full medical journals, so I can't give you any details if you want to ask questions, which I'm totally ignoring from the chat room. But let's see. There's two cases I can give you examples of. In 1997, an article in the British medical journal, The Lancet, described 3 verifiable accounts of zombies. In one case, a Haitian woman who appeared to be dead was buried in a family tomb, only to reappear 3 years later. An investigation revealed that her tomb was filled with stones, and her parents agreed to admit her to a local hospital. And that was it. That's the end of the notes that I have on that. I didn't see any resolution to that. One other case is allegedly a well-documented case of a Haitian man named Clairvius Narcisse. I know I butchered that. He entered a local hospital with severe respiratory problems in 1962. After he slipped into a coma, He was declared dead and buried shortly thereafter. 18 years later, a man walked up to Angelina Narcisse in a village marketplace, insisting she was his sister. Doctors and townspeople and family members all identified him as the guy that allegedly died. And he claimed to have been buried alive, dug himself out, and put it to work in a distant sugar plantation. So he was, for 18 years, he had been, he was dug up. Somebody dug him up and put him to work in a sugar plantation. So he was the stereotypical Haitian zombie, which is weird. I don't know how he escaped, but allegedly he escaped and was able to find his sister. And then lastly, I'm going to sum this up. One of the articles that I went by, authored by Mike Morani, he sums this up pretty good. And I'm sorry if I butcher the big words. So he says, hence a bitter irony between the Haitian zombie and its American counterpart. The monster once represented the real-life horrors of dehumanization. Now it's used as a way to fantasize about human beings whose every decision is exalted. While it's difficult to begrudge the storytelling logic of wiping out the many to restore meaning and importance to the few, it's still worth acknowledging the bleak asymmetry of the zombie then and the zombie now. The original emerged in a context where humans were denied control of their own bodies and sought death as an escape. And now in pop culture, the zombie has come to serve as the primary symbol of escapism itself, where the fictional enslavement of some provides a perverse kind of freedom for everyone else. So I thought that was a great quote. That was a powerful quote because it pretty much sums up that this began as a belief from people that were suffering a horrible, miserable, not worth living kind of life. And it has morphed into this form of entertainment today where, I mean, who hasn't, and well, any of us that's watching this and participating, who hasn't said, oh, if there was a zombie apocalypse, there's a few people I know I'd take out right away. And, you know, I would go down there.
So you saying you'd wait before there was a zombie or after?
You know, I mean,
I think he's talking about the Purge.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I know I've said that, but I mean, if there's, no, I didn't, John. Shut up. But it was amazing going down that road and learning about where the belief came from, because I had only heard as far back as the Voodoo legend, you know, of these priestesses and sorcerers, if you will, that would reanimate. They would steal corpses, take them back, and do magic and certain potions, and it would reanimate the corpse and have a slave where they would just put them to work, you know, do things around the house or out in the field or whatever. And I didn't realize it went back to actual slaves, and their belief about the way to get out of their horrible existence. And it's sad. It's really sad that when you think about it, and I don't mean to put a downer on it. That's why I'm glad I'm getting went first. So you guys can hopefully pick it back up. But to think about, like, hey, I was captured. I'm here. I'm going to be working for someone else. I'm going to get beat. I'm going to get treated like shit. And I am forced to work without any choices for myself. I'm trapped here. There's no way out. And I'm going to do this until I die. But if I speed up that process because I want out, then I'm doomed to walk the earth trapped in this body anyway. That's a horrible belief. And it's really sad that people had that, because I'm sure there were a few that were so afraid of that they continued their existence under those conditions and just were tortured. So, all right. So before I pass this off, I'm gonna try to get to some of the questions, because I saw some cues pop up.
Did you run across any of the insects that do the zombies? They insert.
I didn't do it for this because I was just focusing on like the typical Halloween zombie, but I have seen the it's like a larvae that dig into the brain and kind of take control of a bug and make them go up to like a certain.
That's disgusting. Yes,
Yeah.
It's amazing. I
That
read
is-
this.
it is
years ago.
amazing.
Yeah.
but on the same hand, it is like way too close. Way too close.
That it like this parasite it digs into the brain of the bug and it pretty much takes control.
I think you're talking about the fungus that they find in the ants, and it causes them to climb all the way to the top as high as they can, because when the fungus sporulates and the spores pop out, they want it to be high so it can spread more easily.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
You're right.
There's another one that makes them go to the water too, I think.
Yeah, I saw. I don't remember that one exactly, but I did. There was a blurb on that not too long ago.
Dave, Don's got a question for you.
That's the creepy doll hanging in the back. Oh, that is from The Seed of Chucky. That's Chucky's son, Glenn or Glenda or Shitface. Whatever. If you've seen the movie, yeah, you'll get it. So he's pretty creepy looking. He looks good back there. Keeping an eye on us.
I hope betwixt the three monsters tonight. I don't think my monster would have much of a chance. What happens if a zombie bites a vampire?
Oh boy.
I will save that for later. We'll save that for after the show.
Wait a minute.
Nerd scenario number 1.
If a zombie bites a...
If a zombie bites a vampire...
Nothing. He's already dead.
He's already... Well, vampires are undead, right? Aren't they both undead?
They're undead. They're dead and then... It's a good question.
It is. All right, so...
Damn it, Kenny.
Oh,
I'm going to be up till like 4 o'clock tonight going, what the fuck? I'm like looking up resources.
Tim's going to download a AI program, artificial intelligence program, and have it figure out what would happen if a zombie bit a vampire.
Then I'd get a knock on the door from the FBI.
I guess it all depends on if the vampire has... do they have a heartbeat? You know, because if they don't have a heartbeat, they're not pumping blood through the system, so the virus wouldn't go anywhere.
Right.
And the same with a vampire biting a zombie. There is no heartbeat.
But then why do you drive a stake through their heart to kill them?
Because of poor writing.
You know what? Let's jump into vampires. So, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
We'll leave death for last.
Okay, so I think as we get towards some of this background in history, you're going to see some similarities with zombies, especially when you start getting into why and why people believe in them and what people thought. And there's actually a voodoo link with vampires as well. It's a small part of it, but we'll bring that up. So I too, like Kenny, am going to make a lot of use of notes because there is a lot of stuff to remember and go over. So the whole idea of the vampire is it's a folklore, it's the undead, and they need to feed on the vital essence, basically blood of the living to keep going. Vampire stories and folklore have been found in almost every culture. The term was popularized in Western Europe in the 18th century. And that really was the result of a mass hysteria of a pre-existing folk belief in the Balkans and East Europe. And it got so bad that people thought there were vampires running around killing animals and their neighbors and family and friends that they ended up digging up corpses and driving stakes through their heart to make sure that they were...
Did you say Vulcans?
Balkans.
Balkans. My bad. Sorry, geeking me.
I mean, the Vulcans will come in later when the aliens drop down with the vampires.
Okay.
So when you start thinking about it, why did people believe in them? And these are just opening comments. I'll get into a little more detail as we get into this, but it really comes down to the ignorance of the decomposition process. that tended to lead to a lot of this, because people had really no idea of how it really worked and what to expect. And if they saw anything that didn't really meet their expectations, maybe they hadn't decomposed enough to their expectations, or they looked kind of bluish and bloated, and they had blood dripping out of their mouth. They thought, oh, geez, this thing must be alive, and it must be an undead, and it must be feeding. And then they started wrapping it in, like when there was pandemics and disease outbreaks, and people started dying, and they thought that somebody who had died before maybe became a vampire and was now coming in and killing all these people. So there's a lot of interplay between people not understanding death and decomposition, maybe not being able to determine if somebody is truly dead or not. And that was something with zombies, I think I remember from reading a long time ago, is, if you really you didn't have the technology back then, and you weren't really quite as good as trying to figure out if somebody was dead or not. So you didn't embalm them. So what'd you do? You throw them in the ground, and ooh, maybe that was a little too soon. And they actually weren't really dead. So that was a problem with zombies, I think, as well as vampires, and some of the beliefs and cultural things that came up.
I know that they had, just to add some information, because of that, because they had so many times where they buried someone who was not dead, they had grave bells.
Yes.
Which was an awesome thing. Yeah, it went down to the coffin so that when the person woke up and they weren't dead,
ring the bell
on the bell, and hopefully the
sons of bitches, I ain't dead yet.
Hopefully the caretaker would hear the bell and they would come out and
get them. Wow.
It
seems to me that would take a while. So I hope they had an air tube going down there too, because you're not going to last.
Imagine if they got the string, they have to have some kind of tube.
A little bit, suck some air down there. All right, so where do zombies come from? What are some of the thoughts? I'll go more into the folklore and the ancient part of it, but a lot of them felt that they were evil beings, people who were evil in life that came back, suicide victims, witches, or of course being bitten by a vampire. So if you get bitten, we all know that story. The other one was a spirit could possess a corpse. So it's interesting. So you have, people biting others, but then you have this whole idea of a spirit possessing a corpse, and that making them a vampire. We'll get into a little bit more of that as I get through this. Where did the word come from? Vampire in English in 1732. And then it became a little more well known when the epidemic, supposedly vampire epidemics in Eastern Europe, happened. I'm like, wow, vampire epidemics. It's crazy. Wow. And then in Austria, they right after they took over northern Serbia, there was a practice they found of exhuming bodies and killing vampires. And you can find these, I guess they can find these reports and some of the official government documents from that area from 1725 to 1732. Wow. So that's kind of a quick overview. And then going at some of the ancient folk belief and history, we talked about how they've been going on for a long time, millennia. Mesopotamia, Hebrews, ancient Greeks, and Romans, they all had stories of vampires. Demons and spirits were mainly the precursors to vampires. So it seemed like there was this evolution through even Greek mythology, that the gods and then other areas, the demons and spirits kind of turned into vampires. And I said before that one of the thoughts was that a spirit would possess a corpse and they would come back as a vampire. So you can see how some of these things all kind of start to blend together, and they have similar roots. The best known version of what a vampire is really came from Southeast Europe in the 18th century. So most of what we think, and even if we're talking the ancient history of vampires, that's really where I think most of our beliefs and what we understand came from. They're supernatural beings, and this is interesting. They didn't just consume blood, but in the ancient times, the folklore was they consumed flesh as well. So, okay, Kenny, now we can debate. Is it a vampire? Is a zombie? Which
So-
one is it? It's very similar. Undead, rise from the dead, eat flesh
Right.
or blood. So, interesting.
It's because because there's like that idea here that if you're possessed while you're living, you're just possessed. But if you're dead, if you're just a body and then you possess it, do you become living again or do you become a zombie?
I guess you could be a vampire in these, according to this interpretation.
It has so many nerd debates.
It's crazy.
I have never heard of becoming a vampire by a ghost possessing
Yeah,
the
neither
corpse.
have I.
This is brand new. Yeah, this is
great.
So, moving on a little bit, the devil is synonymous with vampire in ancient times. So I thought that was kind of interesting. The Persians, that's one of the very first tales of a blood-drinking demon. So the demon would pop up, find somebody living, drink some blood, and that was a demon back then. But as it evolved, it went towards vampires. So I think a lot of these things, if you go that far back, you're talking about the same phenomena or the same folklore and belief, but then how it branches out and becomes different and gets different names for it is kind of where they start differentiating. And again, 18th century Southeast Europe, that's where our current now our thinking of what a vampire is came from. In Babylonia and Assyria, Lilitu, a demon, she was actually, I believe, the daughter of one of the gods, and she was a demon, and she would feed on the blood of babies. But then in Greco-Roman folklore, the Emparzi, the Lamia, and the Mormo, the Emparzi was a witch. It was a young woman. She would transform herself into the image of a young, attractive woman, seduce men, and then drink their blood. I can imagine what's going on in the chat room right now. And the Lamia, that was a demon that would prey on children who went to bed at night. And then, of course, the Mormo, that was just another creature that would feast on the flesh and the blood of people. So moving to a little more modern, so we went real ancient, the Eastern Europe thing we got into, 17th and 18th century. The earliest recordings of vampire activity occurred and came from Croatia in 1672, where Jurgrando, this person died in 1656, became a vampire, and he came back and drank blood and supposedly sexually harassed his widow. So nothing like getting attacked and then sexually harassed by your dead vampire husband. It got so bad that they put a stake through his heart, and then later on the corpse was beheaded just to make sure. Because you got to make sure it's like a double tap. You stab him in the heart, then you cut the head
double
off.
tap. I like that.
Absolutely. Yep.
2 shot center match.
So then in 1721 in East Prussia and Habsburg, 1725 to 1734, there was 2 more famous cases. I won't go over those. Basically, same thing where somebody died and then they came back. One of them was a son. He asked his son after he came back and said, "Hey, can you get me some food?" And the kid's like, "No." Well, the next day they found the kid dead. And then the neighbors started dying of blood loss around them. And they're like, "Oh, well, we have a vampire outbreak, so we have to deal with that."
Of course.
So
And then the other one, what's that, Tim?
Now we got this on our plate.
Now we got this problem. Not only were we trying to survive the plague and just find enough damn food and make it through the winter, we have vampires. Another guy, he was attacked by a vampire earlier in life. He didn't become a vampire, but then when he died, he became a vampire. And then the neighbors started dying. And again, they're like, "Whoa, vampire. We have a vampire problem." So some of the modern beliefs, moving into Malawi, East Africa, in September of 2017, this stuff still goes on. They thought they had a zombie outbreak, And it happened actually in the same area in 2002 and 2003, where mobs in 2002 and 2003 stoned one person and attacked 4 others. And even the mayor was attacked because the villagers thought that the government was in cahoots with the vampires. I'm like, oh, that's some logical thinking. But then again, some of the stuff we see in politics these days, who knows what's going on with monsters and the government. Again, in September, as I said, 2017, in the same area, they killed 6 people, which were accused of being vampires in 1970. Highgate Cemetery in London, that people thought there was a vampire running around there. And then Romania, February 2004. Toma Petre was feared a vampire. They dug up the corpse, they tore out the heart, burned it, mixed the ashes in, and then people drank it as a cure. Gives a whole new meaning to chocolate milk.
No, yeah, no, thank you.
That's my favorite, chunky style.
So some of the
I'm a vegetarian.
some of the possible reasons for it, and decomposition, I talked about that, not understanding death and decomposition. Premature burial, we covered that. Contagion was a big one, and they cited tuberculosis and bubonic plague. And one of the things with pneumonic and sometimes bubonic plague is your body would become very blue. They, of course, would bury you. And with those types of diseases, you would sometimes get blood that would gurgle up and trickle out of your mouth. So, of course, when they dug up the body, saw the weird coloration, didn't expect that, and they saw the blood, they thought, oh, this must be a vampire that's getting up and feeding on people. So there's a lot of mass hysteria and a lot of people kind of just diving into weird things from something that they know very little of. Then there was a chemist in 1985, David Dolphin, that thought that a rare disease, porphyria, where you have very low intravenous heme, which means you have a hard time with iron and red blood cells. Yeah. And a lot of times they transfuse heme right in. He thought that maybe vampires and the whole lore would have been people who had this disease, and they thought by drinking mass amounts of human blood that it would be able to cross over the stomach and then provide what you needed. Well, we know that that doesn't work, and that's actually been dismissed and discredited as a potential cause of why people believed there was vampires. And then we have rabies, which could be another reason, because when you have rabies, some of the symptoms are you're very hypersensitive to light. In the one article I saw, that you're actually hypersensitive to garlic as well, which I don't know if that's for everybody or if it's just a rare symptom. But their sleep patterns are also messed up, and they can be very hypersexual, which if you look at vampires, there's always a sexual overtone in those movies, and all modern ones, the older ones. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Then we're getting into some of Tim's favorite stuff, the psychodynamic possibilities, where the unconscious drives certain defense mechanisms, and then love, guilt, and hate can fuel the idea of returning from the grave. And there's a desire for the living for a reunion. So when you're mourning the death of somebody, you kind of project this idea of the dead returning, and you yearn for them to come back and provide the love and what's missing. So there's this projection idea that people want people to come back from the dead, but I'm not quite sure how it translates into something popping up and trying to drink your blood and turning you into one of them. Psychopathology, there's a couple cases they cited where certain murderers back a long time ago, and then newer murderers, that they would drink the blood of their victims. So they thought, well, maybe those people are vampires, or they think they're vampires. And then I like the political one. Count Dracula, part of the story there and what they thought is it's symbolic of how the upper class or the government feeds on the peasantry. So it's like, oh, it's political. Vampires are political. It's a symbolic of the parasitic regime. So how they just suck everything out of you, suck the life out of you. You keep working. And then Marx defined capital as dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor. And lives the more labor it sucks. So he made this connection of vampires. It's just like capitalism, basically. And it's capital, and it's something that they just continue to suck stuff out of. So
suck.
Suck. Now, voodoo. So voodoo, I'm going to talk about this. The loup-garou is a combination of beliefs from French and African voodoo. It's a French term. It comes from the French term loup-garou, which means werewolf. And then there's legends and stories of these things running wild in the Caribbean islands and then Louisiana. And then that would tie into some of Kenny's zombie part that he discussed. Let's see if a couple other things. I mean, we all know what vampires are supposed to do: suck blood, turn you into a vampire. Can't see themselves in the mirror, supposedly. I'm just going to pull out a couple interesting points here in some of this. Now, how do you identify a vampire back in the ancient days? Well, one idea was you put a virgin boy on a virgin stallion and you walk around the graveyard, and the horse would bulk at the grave of a vampire.
What the fuck? What is up with people? Who was like, well, we need a virgin boy. That's the only way. What fucking research did you do that came up showed that you needed a virgin boy?
They got drunk, thought that sounded like a good idea. They probably had a show like this at one point where they just sat in front of a crowd of people and came up with shit. Another one was little holes in the earth that would possibly say, oh, something must have dug out of there. That's tell the government to suck it. Nice. Death of cattle, sheep, relatives, neighbors. That's always a good sign there might be a vampire running around. Poltergeist-like activity. And then pushing on people in their sleep. Sounds kind of like sleep paralysis. How do you protect yourself? I'm not going to go through that. I thought the one thing that never came up in any of the ancient beliefs, though, is they did not have any vulnerability to sunlight.
Wow.
Yeah. So I really honestly couldn't figure out where that part of it came from. And then there's we've talked about different ways to kill or destroy a vampire. I think there was something called a resistant case, like antibiotic resistance. There's like vampire killing resistance or something. And in those cases, they would dismember the body, then burn it, and again, mix the ashes with the water and give it to the family as a cure. Imagine being told you have a vampire in your family. And we have a cure for you. So, all right, moving into some of the modern stuff to finish up real quick here. Popular, it began in the 18th century with poetry, with John Polidorus, I believe that's how you say it, with the vampire in 1819, and Varney the vampire in 1847, Dracula from Bram Stoker, of course, in 1897, Nosferatu in 1922, and that actually, sorry, I did find that was at the end. That is where it was introduced that they were afraid of daylight, with Nosferatu in 1922.
Okay.
And then 1920s, there was a lot of stage and acting, and that's where the cloaks, the black cloaks, and the higher collars came in, so they could disappear on stage and run off stage without being seen. So there was kind of a theatrical. Yes, I did, Jennifer. Varney the vampire. I know it sounded like Barney. Barney is a big purple scary thing. That's pretty funny.
Kenny, what the?
That is funny.
Holy shit.
What is going on here? All right. We're going to finish up with film and TV, then we'll go through all the great comments here. 1922, I already said Nosferatu. 1931, Dracula with Bela Lugosi. 1966, Dark Shadows. And then I don't know if anybody remembers the remake they did in, I think it was the early 90s. 1974, Salem's Lot. Then we had the Blade films, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, followed by Angel. I never watched that. 1994, Interview with a Vampire. 1992, of course, the very famous Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's a rough night, isn't it? And then True Blood in 2008. And then there's a whole lot of other ones. And bats, only after they were discovered in South America, mainland, in the 16th century. English language, the vampire bat, you heard about it, the English language in 1734, and the zoological societies didn't give the common name of vampire bat until 1774. So the only thing they really do is bite, and they could potentially give you rabies, but it's not really much related to vampires, and you won't see any reference. Yes, Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker. Sorry. I have a big drink here, so that's what the show's all about.
I'm so happy.
So anyway, that's what I found out on vampires. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. Did I find out what the deal with garlic is? No, that actually.
You mentioned something about an allergy to garlic.
Yeah, but there was, and I don't remember. I didn't write it down, but there was another culture that didn't use garlic. They used hemlock and something else. So I would have to look into that. I did not get to the bottom of why they can't deal with garlic. Besides, obviously, as you know, anybody who drinks or eats a lot of garlic, it's pretty nasty breaths. Nobody wants to get close to them.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So
all right.
The turn in the comics. Why don't we do this? Let's take our break. Let's take our commercial break. Everyone that's watching, if you have questions, you have 2 minutes and 20 seconds or so to put them up on the chat, and then we'll take the questions, and then we'll close out with the Grim Reaper and Tim's research on that. So here we go. We got the commercial break, and 2 minutes and ready, go. All right, we are back.
Glad to see the Bram Stoker comments getting. I probably should have used that as my Dracula name. Boy, I wish I would have thought of that before. So, okay, I looked up something for garlic and vampires because I didn't do that in my pre-work, my homework. So a couple of theories, not theories, I will say hypothesis. Nobody on the internet knows the fucking difference between a hypothesis and a theory, but that's okay. That's a whole nother show, boys.
Oh boy.
All right. It smells bad. That's just simply one, and they just don't like the smell. Two, garlic could cure a vampire. Because at a time, especially in Russian lore, they thought a blood infection could be the cause of being a vampire, and garlic is actually a very strong natural antibiotic, and it can kill infections. So, of course, the vampire wouldn't like that. Here's a very encompassing one: evil spirits hate garlic. Okay.
Naturally.
I like
Yeah.
garlic.
So
Common
that
knowledge.
just kind of, I guess that's a myth. It's a powerful charm against all types of evil, especially in China and Malaysia. So we did talk about how evil spirits or spirits could potentially possess a corpse. So that could be a part of it. And I believe there was one more, but they have a delicate sense of smell that's related to the smell part of just not liking it. And they find it very offensive. And oh, this is interesting. They hypothesize that garlic is a blood thinner. So you really want to thin out the blood that you're taking in to keep you alive.
Yeah.
You like it nice and thick. So I agree with whoever just made. I'm sorry, I didn't catch who it. Melissa said, "I call BS. I love garlic." Yeah, I think the garlic thing is. I'm not too sure, but like a lot of these myths and folklore, I mean, it's like one person does something or one culture does it, and then for some reason they think it works, and there really sometimes is no rhyme or reason at all behind it, and it's hard to pin down some of this stuff. There are a lot of different thoughts on where these beliefs and folklores come from.
It's interesting when you go back into not only the history of certain things like that, like the general history, the mainstream history, but the local versions, because it will come up with like whatever is available. Because if they didn't have garlic available in their region, it would be something else.
Right.
And it's just interesting to go through that. And one last thing I wanted to show before we go to Tim, I want to show my awesome autographed
Ooh,
of the legendary George Romero.
that is awesome, man.
Love it.
That's
Love
cool.
So, Tim, let's get into some death.
Death.
So,
Death is good.
what do you got?
Okay. So the Grim Reaper, how we know the Grim Reaper today, look at that. I'm getting so used to the backwards camera. It's typically like you see on there, the hooded black cloak with the scythe. So I found it looks like it went all the way back pre-bubonic plague. It's very interesting that Dave mentioned the Black Death. We'll just call it that. It's just easier than, because I'm getting a buzz, and if I start trying to say bubonic, it's just going to come out all fucked up. So
You'll
Black
say
Death.
something fucked up like
What
Stroker.
plague? What plague was that?
Black Death. The boob line.
The boob. There it is. The boobonic plague, followed by the pubonic plague.
The pubic plague.
Oh my God, this is gone. Okay. So the Black Death.
Oh shit.
So before that, let's just say I found that there were many cultures all over that had lots of way of personifying death. It's just ways of dealing with death. It's a way to help understand death. Like, again, going back to, I think Dave and I probably ended up in the same time span with vampires as I did with the Grim Reaper. But this is where it comes from. It's not necessarily what we know of, like our vision of him today, but this is where it starts. So prior to the Black Death, there were plenty of other cultures. Everybody seemed to do the same thing, explaining why death, what happens after death. Can people come back and talk to us? Can people come back and exact revenge on us? Same thing. All of a sudden, Black Death hits. There looks like there is a nasty percentage of people that died. Some of the estimates, it's really hard to come up with an estimate because of record keeping, obviously. But the estimates seem to center around somewhere between 40 to 60% of the known population had passed away. So that could be over half of the population. At that time, I can't do it. I'm not going to even try. I started to try it. And I was like, I can't do it. It's
Come
a
on,
terrible,
Tim.
terrible play. So at this time, there just happened to be this very famous story that came out, and it was called The Legend of the Three Living and the Three Dead. It was so popular in the late 13th century that that story had crossed over to 5 different languages in 5 different areas of Europe. So the Grim Reaper, as we know, comes from the area of Europe. This story, as it goes, and this is a very generic reading because it comes in different places. They adapt it to fit their culture, but it's basically 3 rich or landowners or knights or powerful men were riding their horses in the country. They came upon 3 graves, and when they approached the graves, 3 skeletal forms in 3 different stages of decomposition rose to meet them. Yes, they recognized them, the 3 skeletons, as either ancestors or themselves. The skeletons then told them the stories and tales of the need for redemption, saying you're sorry to people you've wronged, compassion, following God. You basically kind of get the idea of the story. It's just it's a way to, like, it's like a fairy tale. It made me think of like tales to tell people to get them to live right, I guess, to honor your neighbor and stuff. So that became a very popular story, was retold several times throughout Europe in many different ways. Then there was this drawing, that's so disrespectful. There was this beautiful painting, piece of art called all right, get ready, Compassanto in Pisa. So Compassanto.
Just stopped.
Camp Passanto means cemetery.
Passanto. That's right. You
Yes.
can't Passanto.
I can't.
Can't
It just
pronounce
means-
so.
I can't pronounce so. I could do that one. In pizza. Fuck. In pizza.
Holy shit. I'm telling you, we got to have a show where people just give us words to pronounce.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Buddy.
I can't drink this much and go last. This is
Oh.
just
Oh, that's funny, dude. I love it because we laugh, and 10 seconds later, on the delay, I hear my wife laughing downstairs.
So basically, it's the cemetery of pizza, right? So it roughly translated is means the triumph of death. This was all taken care of and put up between 1335 and 1340, and this was actually inspired by that story itself. The painting celebrates the celebrated frescoes of this, because there are many pieces to it. The Triumph of Death has many scenes of the Last Judgment, Hell, and Legend of the Hermits. I didn't bother looking up what the hell that was. The painting also, obviously, was in the time of the Black Death. I want to... I'll pull it up in just a minute if I can't share my screen. I have a piece of the drawing that I was able to a piece of the artwork that I was able to get a screenshot. So I'll show you in just a minute. During the years of the Black Death, in literature and art, skeletons began to emerge because that's what you associate death with. That's what you see. So 40 to 60% of the population that are dying, there's no place to put them. There's no place, they can't get rid of them fast enough. And they just actually start to decompose in streets, in towns. They try to haul them out of the towns. You probably saw the, what's the skit? Bring Out Your Dead.
From Monty Python.
Monty
By
Python.
Monty Python, thank you. Yeah. That's actually...
Bring out your dead.
Yes.
I'm not dead yet.
That's actually a thing. So there was someone that would come around and cart off the dead. They tried to take them out as far as they could. So the art and literature and media at the time began to reflect what they see, which is skeletons everywhere. So skeletons started becoming synonymous with death in art. It's also what I found interesting at this time as well was at the time of the Black Plague. It was also at the time that paintings and images started emerging of churches and cemeteries full of people of all walks of life. So the rich and the poor, the powerful, the not powerful, landowners, not landowners, everybody began to show up in art together, even in powerful places together. So prior to, there would be places where people would worship in church, and it would be specific to the rich, and there would be places for people to worship, which would be with the poor. But during the Black Death, they all were together, basically symbolizing at the time what they were telling in the art was, it doesn't matter what you got, we're all going to fucking die. So let's just do it together. So at this time, though, you can start seeing in the pre-Renaissance the types of drawings of churches and cemeteries where everybody's together. The triumph of death motifs, death scenes from above the paintings, shows battles with death, skeletons, and large totals of death would take. It was during this period that skeletons would be depicted with weapons as well. So the bow, the sword, the sickle, and the scythe. So
I'm
going to
right.
Thank you. I'm not going to do it again.
Okay.
But this painting was the first painting that death was personalized, I guess, was put up as an image with a scythe. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and the really clear image of this was I had to buy for $9.99. So you guys just get the free version.
Submit your expense report. I'll approve it later.
Can you see it? Okay.
There you go.
So this is really hard. This is the one. So this is part of the scene.
That
You
is
see like
cool.
you can see the little devil. Yeah. So this is what people were seeing. This was a reflection of the times. So this person right here is death. It's not the Grim Reaper, but it's death. And if you can outline, there is the blade of the scythe, and those are bat wings.
Oh, okay, yeah.
On their back, and that's hair, and he's coming to swipe all these people.
Oh,
Is
wow.
that easier to see?
Oh,
There's his feet.
I see this.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. He's flying. Okay. Now
Yeah, he's flying. Yeah.
flying. Come down. Oh, those people are fucked.
Yeah, they've got no chance.
They're so fucked.
They're done. They're out. Okay, so this is the first image that at least was popularized of an image of death as they saw it.
Wow. Okay.
And let me stop screen. Okay, stop screen. And back to my notes. So in the 14th century, now we're starting to enter into the Renaissance. This Petrarch wrote Triumph of Death after reviewing this very painting and the fresco that we just saw. He was inspired to do so. His poem inspired more art of death being illustrated by armed skeletons. So now we're beginning to see where armed skeletons in his artwork post his poem that he published, which
I'm sorry, what? What did he
post
post?
his poem that went published.
Okay.
It was quite the hit. It went across Europe, and so more literature and artwork came up. Where you begin to see skeletons that are armed.
Okay.
So in the 14th century, and this kind of made me think about the Halloween that we talked about, the history of Halloween back then. So 14th century, they began to popularize agriculture in drawings and artwork and the media. So death and agriculture began to intertwine because of the time that you would take down the fields was also the time that you would be storing the food, just like what was it? It's not Samhain. How did we pronounce it? Samhain?
Samhain.
Yeah, it's the same time that you're beginning to cut your harvest. And what do you do when you cut your harvest? You have a large scythe. So yeah, skeletons began showing up in agricultural artwork. Now, sickles, the very small one, the users of sickles were called reapers. The users of scythes were called mowers, which I thought was hilarious because that's what we call it now. But they went with reaper because I guess the grim mower sounded better. Yeah.
Mower of death.
Mower of death
Doesn't work.
So let me find my notes here. So we're going forward. It began to image into lots of skeletons with sides representing death. There was a time, let me find this, in the 18th and 19th century, the skeletal image of death began a compassionate side. So people started going into this masked death, which I guess as they began to get farther away, they were far enough away from the Black Death that now that they would be able to see death as a compassionate thing. So when you're looking at people suffering and they're in immense pain, you know, you can see at this time that death was something that would come in and give them great relief. However, weirdly enough, in the 18th and 19th century, it began to become eroticized. And there was eroticized images of death and known as the demon lover. Has nothing to do with the Grim Reaper. I just thought it was pretty badass. I didn't Google that because I don't want that on my history. Have fun with that. So the first naming of the Grim Reaper first appeared in English literature in 1847. It's found in the publication of The Circle of Human Life. Since then, the Grim Reaper has taken on all kinds of images. It began after 1847. They actually began to see literature not only after being, I mean, I guess if you could eroticize it and see it as compassionate and love, you could also begin to see it as human and being funny. So the personification of death really did start taking on human qualities. So now there's literature, there's movies, there's different things where death is actually funny, is a jokester. And this is even, I know that I kind of laughed with Bill and Ted, but there are 1920s, 1930s movies where death is a prankster. He's just a prankster, or she's a prankster. I guess you really can't. They're a prankster, I should say. And it flowed from there. Now you can see a Grim Reaper playing board games for people's soul, working out, walking their dog. Psychologically, what this looks like is it's a way to understand death. So if you are coming through life and death is just some black void, you don't know what it is, it's very scary, you have nothing to know about death. If death is then described to you, or if you see images of or read about or begin to associate death with human characteristics, it just makes it a little easier to understand, and maybe if not understand, to align yourself with that it's not so scary. So death might be someone just like me. They hate their job. Maybe their job is like, shit, I got to get up, punch the clock, go kill some people, get back in time to play some video games. So then it's not so bad. It's not so bad. And there you go.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Oh my God.
That's very cool. I really didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
And what was that plague again?
The
What was the plague?
The bubonic plague.
Buble?
Bubonic.
Oh.
So the question of who the best Grim Reaper was, the actor, I think Kenny answered in the chat, right? The guy from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh,
Absolutely.
fuck yeah.
I think number 2 for me comes in with Norm Macdonald on The Family Guy.
Oh my God! Yes.
Nice.
I forgot about that.
Oh, that's
Yeah, the guy on Bill and Ted's was fantastic. Something
Yes.
Sadler. I can't remember his full name.
He did so awesome because he played the fearful one in the beginning and then just the goofy one and then played a badass guitarist. I love it. Or bassist. I think he was the bassist, but awesome.
Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. I love that. I love it. All right, so we're doing good. We're well over our time,
Mm-hmm.
our usual time. But all right, so let's do some final thoughts. I'll go first. So I think this was a fun show. I think this was great because we took some monsters that, like, I think when people think of Halloween, they first think of ghosts and witches and goblins and stuff like that. Those are more like the I don't know, merchandise kind of industry, kind of like let's put cartoons together kind of monsters. And I think we took some monsters and really dug into the history, which is what we do. I mean, I think we had a lot of fun doing that. I enjoyed it. I found out a lot more than I thought I would about zombies. And listening to both of you guys, I learned a lot more about vampires and the Grim Reaper than I thought there was, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope you guys liked the history lesson, and I encourage you to maybe look it up later. But I think we should definitely do this again, maybe next year, because I don't know what the topic is for next week yet. But definitely put this up for next year because there's plenty of monsters left, and it was just fun. It was fun. It was getting into it wasn't so creepy, as in interesting.
Mm-hmm.
To me. So
I
that's
agree.
my final thoughts. So I'm gonna pass it down to Dave.
Same thoughts. I thought it was fun again to look into something I only really had a passing, if at best, a passing knowledge about on vampires. So it was fun. I know, and boy, I must have had too much to drink tonight. But there was another show. Kenny said we should all go look up something and look into the history of it and come to the show. And I remember, all I remember is he picked a certain topic, and I'm like, fuck, that's gonna be awful. And then at the end of the show, I'm like, that was a really good show. I learned a lot. So again tonight, in going into this, I had a lot of fun. I was excited to look into vampires and love to hear more about zombies, and Tim with the Grim Reaper. That is a bunch of stuff. Yes, my dear wife, Jen. I was stroked over the entire show. Not stoked, stroked.
That's why he kept muting his mic.
See, Tim, you have no idea. You might mess up a pronunciation, but this mistake I made, it's going to live with me for the next 4 hours. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, but yeah, I had a lot of fun. I love looking up this stuff, doing the deep dive. And quite honestly, I love the people that listen to the show, our audience, because sometimes you think we're kind of drifting into a lot of history and it's getting a little boring, but the conversation, the questions, the interaction with the audience, the listeners, and then you two, it makes it a lot of fun. So it's pretty hard to find a topic that is not a good time. So I had a lot of fun. Again, I learned something, and that's always important. So good show.
Awesome. Tim.
Oh, I absolutely had a great time with this. Again, the Grim Reaper, I just picked it when I was messaging you guys my thoughts. And then for some reason, out of nowhere, the Grim Reaper popped up, and I literally saw Bill and Ted at one of the images. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's the one. So I started looking into it and was just really enthralled about the history. I think mine, along with Dave, and vampires, it feels like it's just ways that people would deal with death and the unknown things about death. Especially, I love that he mentioned, the corpses, and, you don't know, like they had no clue. And like, I remember like gums receding, makes your teeth look longer, when you die. And people would say, oh, your fingernails grow. They don't, it's, your skin, it's just, they didn't know that. Same with mine. Like they didn't understand what was going on. And so if you could imagine living in a time, let's just say 4 out of every 10 people that dies, like quickly and horribly, maybe 6 out of every 10 people that die. And you have no concept of death. You have no concept of germs. You just don't know. So what else do you have but to start thinking of ways to deal with death and coming up with it?
Mm-hmm.
and it was really fascinating. There was a lot more to it, especially in other cultures that I didn't get into because it would have taken away. Basically, it was really interesting, but what I was looking for was our popular image of the Grim Reaper. So I would suggest, if anybody's really interested in it, the artwork is fantastic. I got into that. There was a lot of imagery I wanted to get and share, but I didn't. People, this is true.
That's a good one. I'm the same way. I mean, thinking, like, listening to you guys talk with these final thoughts, and then looking back on what I researched, like it almost comes into a total mind fuck thinking that so long ago, like we're talking 1700s, 1800s, where people had their choice in life was either I work and get tortured until I die, and then I get freedom, or if I choose the easy way out, I am tortured by being trapped in my own body and roaming around forever, not doing anything, not interacting, not. It was a horrible choice, and the origin of this is just like a mind fuck. Like, what do you do? And I have no concept. I have nothing to compare it to because I have no idea how that life would be.
Can I say one thing about that?
Sure. You can say anything you want.
Doesn't that
you can, if you can pronounce it?
Well, if you can understand it.
Okay.
I'll talk all the time. With the boob.
Oh, man.
I have a request. It was the bubonic. I can't say it. It's a bubonic plague.
Bubonic plague. There you go.
Plague. Yeah, thank you. Whew. So the thing where, like, if you kill yourself, you're doomed to.
But if you kill yourself, you might be a vampire.
But that makes me think, like, that is something that if you don't want the people that you are extorting to take the easy way out, that is something that you would insert into their belief system, that you can't kill yourself, because if you do, it'll be worse than that, which is even more disgusting to me as well, is to put that into a culture that you are extorting.
It's horrible. It's horrible. All right, guys. So we're at the end of our show, like 23 minutes ago. But you guys got anything coming up? Tim, you got anything coming up?
I do this show every Saturday. It's pretty cool. Two of my good friends that make me say hard words when I'm drunk. Three Tortured Souls. Other than that, nothing else.
Awesome. Dave, you got anything coming up?
Quite honestly, it's probably just this show, and with a new opening every week, that's taken a little bit of time. So it's the show. See you next week.
That's awesome. A really good opening. I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
All right, so my turn, because I always have too much shit going on. So next week, starting Tuesday night, I'm nervous and excited about it. I'm going to start an 8-week course, which is one night a week, with Lloyd Arabak, and I'm going to co-teach with him a course from the Ryan Institute called A Skeptical Approach to Parapsychology, and it's basically him talking about parapsychology topics, and I'm going to give my point of view on some of the things.
I got to make sure I sign up for that. Hold on.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I got to make a note of that.
No, I'm already going to put it in there. No Dave Schumacher. No,
hey, don't Haas me.
Oh, wow.
What? I didn't hear that right.
Awkward.
I think I pronounced that wrong. Don't vicar me is what I meant.
Okay. So yeah, that's going to start next Tuesday night. I'm looking. Donna just yelled up, "Vicared."
I heard.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I got that coming up. Every Friday night I do my Skeptical Help Bar. at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's a live show. We drink like this, and I pretty much go solo, except I have Donna next to me producing, and she does commentary throughout. What else do I have? I have a couple podcasts coming up, but as for conferences or any like big events, I don't have them anymore for the rest of the year, and I don't plan on it because I have too many other projects that I have to get done first. I have started a new series, a video series with Skeptical Inquirer called Ghost in the Machine, and the last episode was published 2 days ago, I think, and it's about the Xbox Kinect and use in ghost hunting, and I like it, so check it out. It's on skepticalinquirer.org. With that, we are done, and who's up next week?
I believe I am.
You are. Awesome. I'm good. I'm glad it's not me because it's so hard coming up with a topic sometimes.
You had the earliest announcing of a topic ever.
I know.
During the show.
You got to beat
Damn.
that. You got to beat that. So, like, next
But don't
time.
worry, it was still Thursday or so. We were working out how we were going to actually do the
How we were
show,
gonna do it,
what the format was going to be.
Okay. All right. So, everyone else, have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. You still got Sunday. Enjoy the rest of the week. We'll see you next week, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here. Same bat channel, same bat time. Oh, I'm probably going to get a copyright issue on that, but oh well. All right. And that's about it. So see you later, guys.
All right, guys. Have a good weekend.
Oh,